Welcome and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Laura Jeffords Greenberg, General Counsel at Worksome, and I'm joined by Vanessa Barnett from Keystone Law. So thank you so much for joining us. The reason that we wanted to talk today is because we've spent our careers in technology, and we've also seen the rise of companies claiming that they are AI powered. I think you and I both separately have been thinking about where AI should be placed in different workflows and how to use it in software. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to be discussing that. But before we get started, would you mind giving us a brief background about who you are and what you do?
I can. First of all, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for giving me an excuse to come to Copenhagen. I'm a technology, data, and AI lawyer. I spend my working days thinking about how companies are building, buying, selling technology-based products, which covers a lot of AI, a lot of data, a lot of IP. And actually, we just need to ferret around a little bit and find where the AI should really be, and also just the places where you might go, actually, hang on a minute.
Over the last sort of 6 months, a lot has been changing and AI seems to change like every, I don't know, second day. But what should we be paying attention to right now in the EU AI Act?
I think what we should be paying attention to is that there is an EU AI Act, because I'm not entirely sure that everybody is aware. I think if you are an EU-based company that's really building and exploiting technology, you've probably got some good awareness, because you've probably got people like you going, this thing is happening, pay attention to it. But actually, people need to be taking a step back, and it's almost like they need to go, actually, how is my business even using AI? Like, what are the people doing? Have I got any kind of visibility of that? Do I know? Because, without that knowledge, you can't stress test, well, does this bit matter? How are they using this bit? When might the act be relevant? And actually, it's not just the act. There are lots of AI laws popping up all over the world, and it's a bit like whack-a-mole, isn't it?
So just from a question, since we both have worked with companies that have built software, how do you recommend that people think about, building software or building AI into your software versus the AI that maybe the marketing team is using to help them write marketing copy or generate images? Do you see a difference between those two, and how do you think about it?
Yeah, and actually, I quite like to compare and contrast when the GDPR came out to when the EU AI Act came out. If we think back to the GDPR, it was working in silos, it was, compliance bits of paper, and it wasn't really a joined up team kind of process at the start. And the fundamental difference now with AI, and particularly if you're using it to build, is you've got to have really joined up internal teams talking to each other and going, oh, we're using this tooling. We're using this tooling to do this thing. What do we think the implication of that is? And that applies whether you're doing it in a product and how you might be feeding it in, because you've got some, slightly more punchy obligations there. But equally, if you're using a piece of marketing tooling and you're putting an entire database in there, what's happening to it? Where's it going? Like, how clear is that for you?
So I like the comparison to GDPR because that's also how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Again, you need to know right where data is flowing and understanding your operations. So do you see any differences to, what are the differences to implementing GDPR if we look back to when GDPR first came out? Or maybe how can we do things differently or handle it better?
So I think when the EU was cooking up the EU AI Act, I think they might have done a tiny bit of self-reflection about what happened at GDPR.
Yeah.
And I think we probably had a kind of earlier timeline and a bit more awareness. My reflections looking back at GDPR is it was lots of consultants and people who were new to the party running around going, there's going to be loads of massive fines, please pay me for all these pieces of paper. And I'm seeing in the market now that I'm re-advising on stuff that was done in 2018, where I'm taking things out of the drawer that were just awful because nobody talked to each other and nobody knew what they were doing. So my greatest fear and my greatest plea for anyone doing anything now, particularly on the product build side, is have all your teams know what you're doing and talk to each other. Legal needs to talk to engineering, needs to talk to product, needs to talk to marketing. And if those people can all understand the product and how and why the AI is being used, then you can actually, as a lawyer, sit there and go, oh, this is what's happening. This is how the law applies. And I think it's fundamentally different to go product first rather than law first. And I think GDPR was law first. And I think this way around, people are doing it better and they're going product first. Whether that's building it or using it, they're trying to understand the product. And then when they do that, they can kind of speak to lawyers and we go, okay, that engages this bit. Have you thought about doing it this way?
I think that's wonderful analysis and also advice. I mean, as a former product lawyer, my first question is, what is the product? How does it work? Okay, where is data going? And a lot of times I need to see it.
Yeah, you need to play with it. If obviously we're talking to each other, you're doing great things here with AI and the way that you've implemented it here. But, if you're in an environment where people are not letting the lawyer have a show and tell or even a play with the product, that should be a little mini red flag, right?
I 100% agree about that. So here's another interesting question. What do you sort of think about this so-called AI washing risk, right? Where vendors are over-claiming that they're using AI, or maybe under also documenting they're using AI, a combination of both?
Yeah, I think, so, to go back to another GDPR example, if you had gone onto Amazon in about 2016, 2017, you could buy GDPR-enabled paperclips. Okay?
Paper clips.
Yeah, so, people were GDPR washing everything, right?
Sorry, I'm still trying to process the GDPR paper clips.
GDPR-enabled paperclips, exactly, or GDPR-compliant paperclips. So, people like to attach things that they're doing to the buzzword that they think will get them noticed, get the higher revenue, and all of those sorts of things, right? And then equally, some products will say, we've got all this amazing AI. And actually, if everything that was labeled AI is actually AI, then the whole world would be robots by now, wouldn't it? Like, some of these products, you just need to say, hang on a minute, is it AI? Is it just good old-fashioned automation? Is it just that little bit of the product that's AI? How actually does it work? And how do we need to feel about that if we're building it or if we're licensing it and using it? It's all about the facts on the ground, ultimately, isn't it? And if we dive in on those, the rest of it becomes less washy, right?
I'm brought back to when generative AI first came out.
Yeah.
So I think now a lot of times, even when we're saying AI, I think we mean generative AI, right?
Yeah.
Because there's also artificial intelligence, that's machine learning, that is more automation and doesn't have the same risks.
Yeah.
So I think also when you're talking to your teams or talking to your clients, make sure that they understand
what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things is, if you're someone who's in procurement and you've got people in the business coming to you, effectively the people in the business are going, I want to use this shiny new product. But actually, if you're in procurement and if you're in legal and and you're the guardians of doing good, right? You need to kind of go, not just is it AI, but what sort of AI is it, and where has it come from, and how has it been trained, and do I understand it, and do I know where my data is going? Because some of the things that are AI are what you and I might call good old-fashioned automation, but actually some of them are rocket ship level stuff.
So that's the first, I think one of the first pieces of advice, right, is to make sure that you understand what AI is being used.
Yeah.
Yeah, first what it is.
What it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, understand the AI that's being used. What kind of AI is it? What are you using it for? Where's it come from? The product that you're buying, if they say it's got AI in it, you've got to ask another level of questions, haven't you? You've got to say, well, what are you plugging in, and how do we feel about them? Do we trust that they're going to use our data in an okay way? Are we going to use it in a way that we need to buy a slightly more expensive enterprise version so that we can have our own little insulated bubble so that we protect ourselves from leakage, right? All of these questions flow from what are you doing and why are you doing it and how?
And so to sort of build on that, do you have a due diligence framework or sort of basic questions, a mental model, if you will, about
Mm.
what companies should be doing as they're doing the
Yeah,
due diligence
yeah,
on these AI vendors?
yeah. I mean, I don't have it with me now,
Yeah.
but and it might not all come out of my head,
Yeah.
but if you are i- if you are that person and you get that call and you've got to attend a call in 5 minutes where you've got to ask some probing questions of a vendor, question number one is what are you doing? What does your product do? Question number two is, but what's your product going to do for us, right?
And how is that
And
different than what your product does versus?
because it's effectively my product helps me do this business thing, well, their product,
Yeah.
but here's how we're going to be using it in our business. And here's how we think we're going to be using it with you and implementing it and all of those sorts of things. I, I can buy Microsoft Word or I can buy
Yeah.
Microsoft Azure, but every business uses them for different things and uses them differently. And it's the same with AI tooling, isn't it? They're all
Yeah.
being used differently. And then, once you understand what the AI is, where it might be coming from, and how you're going to use it, then I think you need to drill down on the data flows, because that's your biggest risk, isn't it? Because you're buying an empty box, sort of, a very trained empty box,
Yeah.
but then you're going to be putting things in, getting things out, asking it to do tasks. You need to understand that, and they need to show you that they can explain it to you properly. And then you get to the bit where you go, okay, I've figured out what's going on here. I've figured out that this thing can have some value for my business in the way we want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start being slightly more lawyer brain about it and go, well, what's the contract say? What are the warranties and indemnities? What insurance have you got? If it goes wrong, how are we protected? How about your security? What about your human in the loop? How do you keep the models honest? All of that kind of stuff, basically.
And in your advising, are you seeing that most of these vendors are using, let's just call them, I don't know, the premier models, or, they're using Anthropic, they're using OpenAI, they're using Gemini, opposed to having their own. So really we've got, our company that's using this vendor that's then sending it to Anthropic and then
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
in the chain.
So I think some people have quite a simple chain where effectively, they've made a corporate decision that they're just going to go with one because it keeps their life simple. But actually, we're seeing a lot more now in the past 6 months or so. We're seeing people who are effectively plugging in all of the models, and they are assessing, based on the task they want it to do, which model they might think would be best suited to that. So it's not a kind of one size fits all. And then the next layer of that is the kind of large enterprise, bring your own model style plugin. Plugin is probably not the right word, but yeah, the really large people who've got lots of technology development teams are kind of plugging in things they've developed and tweaked with things that are just off the rack. It's getting much more complicated, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
And so maybe we should go then, because you were talking about, okay, from the lawyer brain, but how do I then, let's say I know where the data is flowing, I understand how we're using it. How do then I sort of look at it from the EU AI Act risk assessment point of view? Or for example, Worksome, right? You're able to hire people, right? Hiring people as a high risk activity if we're going to incorporate AI into that. So then how do I think through advising the business on, first explaining what level activity this is, and then how we handle it? I guess that's a large question.
Yeah, it's a very large question. So from an EU AI Act point of view, the way that you've got to think about that is the EU perceives certain activities to be so dangerous that they've prohibited them completely. So a good example of that might be, if in the EU somebody rolled out something like China's social scoring system, that is so offensive from a kind of human rights point of view that that's banned outright. You just can't do it. And if someone had secretly been doing that, they need to stop doing it, right? The next level down, which is the thing that exercises most lawyers and most of their time right now, is the thing I'm doing in a high risk category? And the way that you can fall into high risk from an AI point of view is you fit in one of these two boxes. box number one is you've put some AI into a product that might have a safety aspect to it, like a self-driving car. Box number two is effectively, sorry, there's lots of other products, but that's the best example, right?
Safety, yeah.
Box number two is there's this list of various things which might be high risk. It's all the things that you as a human being would naturally think of, and you'd go, actually, we as humans need a bit more protection if people are doing that. It's things like, if it's scoring you for things based on certain behaviours, protected characteristics, things like that. Your access to work, employment, or access to self-employment is specifically listed as one of those categories. So you know, because of the nature of the overall business model that you have here at Worksome, that if you put AI into that system, that you're probably going to be potentially doing things that are in the high risk category. Mm-hmm. So then immediately you start to think, if you go back to your GDPR brain, you should treat it in the same way as you treat thinking about and worrying about processing special category data. It's that level of compliance that you should equate it with. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be more transparent. You've got to make sure that things are done correctly. You've got to have humans in the loop. You've got to document things more. There's a very long prescriptive list. But you have got more time now to do all of those things because the EU has extended the timetable and kicked it into 2027.
And can we just, because I know we're in a high risk area, but also there's limited and then low. Yeah. And so I think there's going to be a lot in those two buckets for most companies, right? Yeah. So,
if you take Worksome as an example, I'm sure in a minute you're going to tell me a bit more of the detail about what you might be doing here. But, imagine if you were doing something that fit that category because it's people's access to self-employment, but actually maybe what it's doing isn't something that would be considered particularly dangerous. And the EU, thankfully, have thought about that as a scenario. So you can start in high risk from an analysis and a thinking point of view, and then you can go, oh, but hang on, this is actually quite safe. If I meet these gateways, it can become low risk. And so an example of that would be, if you were doing something which was using AI to do a narrow, they call it a narrow procedural task. So like, checking something or scanning something or whatever. Or doing something which is just a sort of add-on to a human task that you're already doing to make it more efficient, then that's not so dangerous. The EU doesn't worry so much about that, and so many of these compliance obligations fall away, and you're back down to sort of a little bit of transparency.
So let's dig in real quick on our example. So we'll start with the limited one first. So we have worker classification here, where the company and then the worker fill out questions. We have answers, we bring them together, and then you're given a score, and it's either, tipped into employee or IC very generically, if we're just going to talk in broad terms. Yeah. So one of the ways that we use AI, and this is going to start first, is that you get your worker classification, and then AI is generating the text to explain that based on the answers. Yeah. So it's not... We're not using generative AI to score anything.
So you're effectively using what I'd call good old-fashioned logic and trees.
Yes, exactly.
To do the perfectly acceptable and good way of doing the classification, and then you're effectively using generative AI to turn it into human.
Correct.
And that would be an example of one of those tasks which actually isn't high risk because you're not doing the high risk thing with AI.
Correct. And then we're just saying, hey, here's a way to maybe make it based on these questions, how you answered them, this is why your classification, and then putting it into, because us lawyers like to have, this is what I need to put on the piece of paper. That doesn't translate to most people. So then we use AI to help explain to the worker why they received that classification.
And actually, if the worker didn't like that, they can say, well, I don't like that, I don't understand that. There'll be, I would imagine there's an avenue to ask a question. So, no one's making a decision about something that affects whether or not that classification falls that way or that way solely based on AI. So what you're doing is a great example, isn't it?
It is. Now I have another question. Let's flip it, and we don't do this, but let's say, generative AI is powerful. It's getting pretty good. I'm just going to have generative AI make up the worker classifications based on information, in the job description and some stuff that the worker,
Yeah.
answer some questions, and then we're going to
Yeah.
be like, here,
Yeah.
how should I analyze that under the EU AI Act?
I think that is something done with AI that can affect that human and their chance of access to employment or self-employment. And I think that is fairly and squarely within high risk. And you probably need to be stepping back from that and going, how are we doing this, and what are we doing it, and do we understand the data? Have we ninjaed the hell out of it? Is it correct every time? Can I prove it's correct every time? Because if you don't have that level of confidence, that won't pass muster.
And so say, I'm fairly confident that it's going to be the same every time, but I don't know.
Yeah, so you don't know.
I can't. But like we've run it, let's just say we've run it thousands of times and it's always come out correct, but still I don't have an audit trail. I don't, as a lawyer,
so
I can't say.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should say audit trail.
Yeah.
The way that you should think about most pieces of EU legislation that apply to technology is if you can't prove it, you've breached it.
That's very simple.
Yeah.
You can make a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
But I think that makes sense, because in that example, what happens if we even had, so let's say that example, I'm using generative AI. What happens is you have the worker classification, then the contract is offered to the worker. So the worker has an opportunity to reject it or object to the classification. The company could also object to the classification.
Yeah.
Would that be enough of bringing a human back into generative AI to satisfy?
But I think you've probably failed further up the step.
Okay.
Because I think one of the things that's really important when we're talking about AI legislation and the EU AI Act in particular is it doesn't sit in isolation, does it? So you've probably failed on some of your reasonable care triggers, for example, in the under tax law in the UK, because you can't prove that you've taken reasonable care to come to that satisfactory conclusion. And so if you can't even meet that, it's unlikely to be considered a fair piece of AI. I mean, it's worth digging into, but I think that...
So I can't Band-Aid it with putting people into the decision process if I haven't actually taken care.
I think what you've not taken care of is properly being absolutely clear that the thing that the AI is doing is correct. Because I think that's one of the most difficult things about AI.
Yes.
You can't always get it to tell you why it's done something and why that therefore is correct. And so you end up, for a decision tree style decision, which this is, I think you've muddied the waters by using too clever an AI.
Because I can't go back.
Because you can't go back and you don't know why and you can't prove it to someone. And because of that, it might be entirely factually correct that this is absolutely completely true every time, but you can't prove it. And you've opened up other risks of challenge. And that's a wider business risk potentially for a business.
Yeah, because you've advised businesses, right? They're like, let's go ahead and use it. Yeah. Everyone's doing it. It seems to be working well. Yeah. We throw some humans in there. Yeah. They have the right to object. We can change it. Yeah. We can rerun it. Yeah. That should be enough, right? Yeah.
But pressing a help desk ticket saying I object probably isn't sufficient.
I'm just thinking about, conversations I've had in the past and like the arguments that people are going to come with. Well, isn't that enough? And it's no. I think it is that documentation part with AI.
Yeah.
So,
but I think it's not the documentation part's really important, but the explainability part is absolutely critical, and that's actually the most difficult bit yet, because explainability means different things to different people. If I talk to an engineer, they'll go, well, it does this because of this and this and this and this and this, and I don't know what they're saying. Right? So how is the person who's being subjected to this process going to understand it? I think, industry as a whole needs to do a lot of work on explainability.
And what standard are we applying to explainability? Like, does it have to be the end user, the person whose rights are affected, need to understand it? what's going on, or is there like a reasonable care?
So the person at the end of the chain needs to understand it because they need to have it explained to them, the process that they've been through, ultimately.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're talking like a sort of reasonable person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
someone with no legal background
Yeah.
or expertise in AI.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
can understand what's
Exactly.
happening.
In the same way that historically we would have written privacy policies in words that people could hopefully understand, in the same way we now need to explain the systems and processes and technology that people are interacting with that lead to a result that may affect them ultimately.
That definitely makes sense.
Yeah. And actually, the ICO in the UK have done a lot of good work on, what explainability means and things like that. There are lots of really great resources that are now starting to be published. It will get easier, but we are at the start of that curve, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So now I have another also similar question, thinking about the questions that I get back from the business when I'm asking them to do things a certain way. We had an issue in the UK tribunal,
Yeah.
and our CEO, he said that I could share this too. It was
Yeah.
like, well, legitimately, like not trying to be facetious, it's a form. We have all the context. Why can't we just have AI fill out the form and then submit it? Obviously, there's some issues with practicing law, but we will sidestep. But
Yeah.
that then forced me to talk to our outside counsel
Yeah.
to say, this is what our CEO wants to do.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why I should use you over AI to fill this out? Just in general, right? There's setting aside some of the other issues. So how do you think about that? Or if you have clients that just really want to use AI instead of you, how do you explain that to them?
I mean, it's really hard, isn't it? Because, if we're honest about it as lawyers, there's some great AI tooling out there. It can short circuit and shrink the time it takes lawyers to do things. It can help people not have to interact with lawyers at all, which in society must surely be a good thing, right? But I think the way I think about how AI should be used by, clients in general is I think at the moment some clients are kind of in a candy store, right?
Yes.
Or the Willy Wonka factory, I don't know, right? And they can see all this stuff and they can see the efficiencies and they put in the prompts and it spits something out or it does something and it has this veneer of this looks and feels right, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always right. And so then if you use that for something that actually matters, you've kind of opened up this pathway of, oh, this thing isn't right, and then it being challenged for not being right, But, I do see things from generative AI. Mr. Claude can produce many good things. They get sent to me for, rubber stamping, and occasionally I go, oh, hang on a minute, what did you actually tell it? Have you told it this, asked it this question? So, I'm a fan of all of these things. I'm a technology lawyer. I love them, but there's a time and a place, right?
Well, that's, I think, going back to, again, explainability.
Yeah.
If I had AI fill out a form for the UK tribunal and submitted it, I am not a UK licensed attorney.
Yeah.
I can't stand behind that or explain that to a judge.
No. And in the UK, in the UK in particular, we have had several examples now of judges and our own solicitors, kind of regulator, censure English solicitors for misusing AI or relying on something that looked right with AI. It's like Spider-Man, isn't it? With great power comes great responsibility, ultimately.
That's a good way to say that. All right. So we had previously talked about our worker classification that's driven by logic.
Yeah.
There are, let's say that there's some competitors out there that have a generative AI-based classification that claims is better than our rigid logic system. And so what would you say to that? Is one, it might be more accurate than our rule-based approach.
Yeah.
But under the EU AI Act, I assume they're going to have some trouble.
I mean, I think they might have some trouble because, if you claim that something is more accurate, well, what evidence have you actually got to stand behind that claim, ultimately? Because if you're just out there saying, my thing is more accurate than the rules-based system, well, their thing should have been trained on the rules-based system. So why shouldn't it have exactly the same accuracy, right? It should be reproducible, the same results, the same HMRC rules if it's the UK, the same case law if it's the UK. So my first challenge always when people say is, my amazing thing that I'm not going to tell you how it works is more accurate than this thing that we've had for quite a long time that works perfectly well, we've just made it faster and more efficient, is effective to say, well, why? Prove it.
That makes sense.
Because if you can't prove it, and you can't document that, and you get a challenge from a regulator, you don't have anything to stand on.
Well, so that was going to be my next question. Let's say I have a vendor, an AI, it has AI in that. And let's just say we can use the same example of AI-generated worker classification.
Yeah.
It doesn't go well.
Yeah.
It is not accurate.
Yeah.
But we've relied on them.
Yeah.
And they've not followed the EU AI Act.
Yeah.
Then sort of do I have recourse as someone that's purchased the services of that vendor?
It's going to depend what's in your contract, right?
But
you've got to be so careful.
But even, let's say I negotiated it well, like, is there any sort of anything from the EU AI Act perspective that could help me, or regulations?
Well, I mean, you're probably quite quickly going to be in a sort of regulator party. And if this was the UK, you'd have the Information Commissioner calling, you'd have HMRC calling, and various other folk like the Fair Work Agency calling, right? Yeah. So all those three regulators would be swarming. Direct rights come ultimately through your contract and what you might have negotiated there, and they're only as good as the drafting. So please don't use Mr. Claude, please use a lawyer. But then the regulators will start kind of picking at this and trying to find evidence for, is it right, is the claim correct? And probably they'll relatively soon find out that, maybe the data isn't being processed in the right way, so you've triggered some GDPR related fines. You've also got twice the value effectively of fines that come with the EU AI Act. And then, from the kind of tax authority point of view, you're just in a whole other level of pain because of the way their fines work, and it's a percentage of the value that you've got wrong effectively. So, everyone can get some recourse through a route or another if this thing isn't exactly what it says and you can prove that it is correct.
That seems very messy.
Yeah.
Purchasing services.
Yeah. And I think, one of the challenges that I give to people who are building AI is, why are you actually using it to do this thing? Because that's the bit where you're going to fall over. Some people just want something that works perfectly well already, done much, much, much faster. But is it really? I don't know. Rules-based systems are pretty quick.
Yes.
And if you deploy tiny bits of AI just to pass messages around and do small procedural tasks and things like that, it's a slightly safer position than just going, here's a big blob that we don't understand.
That makes sense.
But what sort of challenges are you getting from customers potentially with AI? Because you're on the inside of this as a general counsel. What are people saying to you around the trust they have in these products in the market right now?
Well, it's interesting because I've worked in technology, right, for a large portion of my career, and I think we're ahead of the curve, right? And we're understanding how the technology works, using it, deploying it, and so I've run into just a lot of lack of understanding of how AI works. We've not really been challenged on anything, or really, I think a couple customers have asked us how our classification works, and we are able to say, it's logic-based rules. This is exactly how it works. Here are the questions. Depending on your jurisdiction, we give you different scores, weight it one way or the other. And it's repeatable. They see all the answers as well, right? So it's fully transparent how it works. And then if they don't agree with it, they can talk to us about it, and we'll have a discussion. But yeah, I'm surprised, I guess, by how it's not on some people's radar.
Yeah, yeah, and there's my sense of the market is there's a big variance of people who are even thinking about how they should be asking vendors and the sorts of questionnaires that they should be sending out. You know, if you're a large financial services institution, you are sending out a questionnaire from a procurement point of view that's got an AI section in it, and it's asking loads and loads and loads of questions. And you know, that segment of the world
Hmm.
has done their homework because they don't really have a choice. But I don't think that's come from the EU AI Act. I think that's
No.
come from financial regulators and operational resilience and all of those sorts of things. And then everybody else, I think, is a little bit playing catch up. And they, you know, some of these people, honestly, it's taken them a couple of years even to just get their security questionnaires right. And now they have to do an AI questionnaire and a data questionnaire and all sorts of other things. It's a really tough gig, and I've got a lot of sympathy and empathy and all of the fees.
That's actually true. I think most of our questions actually are coming from due diligence questionnaires
Yeah,
from regulated or highly regulated
yeah,
industries.
yeah,
And for us, it's fairly simple because we've made decisions
yeah.
to not use it. So
Yeah,
from
yeah,
our point of view, we have very clear, explain, answer it, good, okay,
yeah,
done.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think that's ultimately also driving, you know, those questionnaires get into the market and they start filtering down ultimately. You know, if you're a small and medium-sized business, you know, you're probably scrabbling around with questionnaires that you've seen a customer give you ultimately. Unless you find someone like me or you, but you
yeah.
know. But I think I think it's harder to self-build these questionnaires, and it's just harder to know what to ask because it's so much more complicated than just how are you processing information.
I was just thinking about due diligence questionnaires, um, and SOC 2, ISO
Mm.
certifications. Do you think we'll see anything like that with sort of standards around AI
They
that you
are
can attach to that?
so they are being built.
Okay.
So I think certifications play like a really valuable role, and there are being developed and updated AI certifications. You know, ISO is definitely doing something, probably has published something, but I, d- I think they're the answer for the nuts and bolts interrogations. Like, does your thing do this? Yes or no? They provide a false comfort from a contractual and a recourse point of view, right? Because you can have a vendor providing a technology product to you. They can have all of these certifications, but you can have a really dud contract that gives you no recourse, and it doesn't matter even if they don't do them anyway. So I think one of the things I strive to do and just talk about, you know, probably boring people with it, is you can't do these things in an unjoined up manner. You know, product engineering, privacy, legal, all of these people need to join together, whether it's to design the product, design the questionnaire, to interrogate the vendors, understand what happens when things go wrong and whether that needs questions. You know, it's actually quite bespoke per business.
So it's really something you need to make sure, going back to the sort of the beginning of the conversation, that we cannot work in these silos and we all need to work together to share
Yeah,
information to
yeah,
make sure that everyone understands what is going on.
yeah. The because the great thing that happens when you work together is that everybody increases everybody else's AI literacy. And when that happens, all the tasks that flow from it are a better quality.
That makes sense.
So, Worksome operates all over the world. I'd be interested to hear your reflections on where you think the EU AI Act might be positioning itself globally. A bit like with the GDPR, it became the gold standard, and actually lots of other countries normalized around it.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right that the EU AI Act will become the gold standard. So, I mean, the EU AI Act has been being drafted for quite a long time.
Forever.
So,
Yeah.
when I was working at a previous technology company, we were even looking at, like, okay, how is this going to impact our development of our product? Do we need to change how we're documenting engineering decisions? And so I do think it is going to be like GDPR, where it is the gold standard. So you think about, if I can meet the EU AAC standards,
Yeah.
then I likely will be able to meet all the different state AI acts that are going to occur in the US or that we're seeing. I think maybe Singapore was the first in other countries. And then you can also kind of just bolt on. So I like to think about like GDPR and then, California privacy has some weird other things that we got to put in there.
Yeah.
So you start with the EUA Act and then bolt on for different jurisdictions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, because when you're doing compliance and trying to get everything right and you operate in more than one country, you've got to start with one thing that is more or less generally applicable. And actually the EUI Act is a good one to pick, isn't it? Because if you're outside and you're targeting the EU, you're captured anyway. So you may as well get it right.
Yeah, and it's also if you're just purely thinking about numbers,
yeah,
right? Again, covering a large area rather than starting from like a smaller country or let's say a state in the U.S. That's going to be harder to reverse engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we've talked about a lot of different things today, but I'd love to sort of sum up, whether I'm looking at a vendor that's using AI, maybe I'm partnering with someone that's using AI, or even building ourselves internally. What is a quick way that I can think about, here's some things broadly that I need to check and look into and then feel that I've at least done an initial sort of due diligence?
Okay, so I think the first thing I would say is, do you understand what's going on? Start there.
It's a good place to start.
And from a technology point of view, from a use case point of view, all of that good stuff. I think the second thing I would say is, like, speak to the lawyers early, because we can help you. We can make you have to do less hard work. And then the third thing is, keep doing all the stuff you're already doing, because you're already doing it right. Your data protection stuff, your intellectual property stuff, all of that good stuff. That isn't changing. You're just bolting on some AI-related stuff.
Perfect. I like that. So the point of the session really was trying to help people to feel more comfortable in assessing AI use, because AI is going to be used in the business. So we want to try to give people a way to think about where it belongs and where it doesn't. So do you have any sort of last words or parting advice that you would like to share?
I mean, I think AI belongs everywhere, but only if you're really sure.
And that's the hard part.
And that's the really hard part.
Figuring out if you're really sure. And as a lawyer, that's even harder.
So I know that Claude is our friend, but sometimes people should speak to real human lawyers, and they should do it early. Yeah, we don't bite.
Yeah, that's also good advice. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us. This recording will be in your inbox tomorrow with a vendor checklist as well. Some questions to ask if you're looking to purchase a vendor that has AI use. If you want to follow both of us on LinkedIn, you can definitely reach out, contact us, and talk to us. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.